Hey guys, I'm so excited to tell you that today's podcast is brought to you by Goody's Pain Relief Powders. I partnered with Goody's this past weekend to run the Knoxville Marathon. I normally use Goody's to recover after the race, but they gave me a big boost during the race this weekend with their Smile 20 video board. Goody's believes that when it comes to pain relief, a smile can go a long way. At mile 20 on Sunday, there was a massive video board where I saw myself running with a huge smile on my face. Seeing myself with a huge AI smile made me laugh and gave me a huge boost to power through and finish the race strong the last 6 miles. When I crossed the finish line, I was naturally feeling pain and soreness, and I thankfully had Goody's on hand to relieve the pain and get back on track. My only note for you guys is never take before or during a run. A quick note on Goody's, if you're not familiar with them, Goody's pain powders dissolve quickly and are formulated to start working fast. Goody's powders target a full range of body pains and headaches, hitting the pain right where it hurts. Their on-the-go stick packs can be slipped into your pocket for quick pain relief when you need it. I like to take my Goody's powder by placing it on my tongue and chasing it with a glass of water. Make sure to always read the directions and use as directed. Right now, for a limited time, Goody's Powders is offering $2 off on select products on Amazon when you use the code TRE2. We will also throw it up on the screen, and I've also left a link in the show notes. For the flavor, I recommend the Cool Orange.
We wouldn't do marathons if they weren't hard, because there'd be no satisfaction in it. The reason why we do them is because they're challenging, because they challenge us to push our limits. They show us what we're capable of, often well beyond what we thought we were capable of.
Dr. Jim Taylor back on the podcast. It wasn't long before I had to invite you back on because, as I just said to you a minute ago, there was a lot of unsaid questions by myself. You blessed me in the audience with so much depth and wisdom around the topics of mental performance. And I can confidently say I am a marathoner this time. So not a sub-3 guy yet like yourself, but an honor and a privilege to welcome you back on. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you, Dominic. Great to be back on. I'm looking forward to hearing about your race. I think it's always a great experience when you break that barrier of having completed a marathon. It's like, then hopefully it's just like, I want to do another one, hopefully.
Sure. I definitely think that's the case. I think there's something really special about setting out for a goal, even if it was stupid in my case of only training for 2 weeks, but then accomplishing it, I think feels really good. And I will say, going into the race, I think I had just a negative perception of the term marathoner because people who do it, they talk your ear off about it. But I have to say, I crossed the finish line and I was like, yeah, I'm a marathoner. It feels good to say. It does feel good to say.
Yeah, and you're part of a community. And I think that's one of the greatest things about running marathons is that there are people who are just so passionate and interested and curious. And it's just great to know people who are like-minded.
I got to ask you, first episode we did with each other, I set the stage of only training for 2 weeks. And I asked you, I was like, do you think, what are your thoughts? Am I in trouble? Do you think I'm good? You said, you were like, you're fine. You'll finish. Were you lying through your teeth to give me a false perception of confidence, or did you truly believe I'd be fine?
No, I truly believed you were fine because you have a running background. You're young. I'm assuming your general level of fitness is quite solid, and pretty much for the most part, everybody is capable of potentially running 26.2 miles. It takes a little effort, but if you have a foundation of fitness, cardiovascular fitness, importantly, as well as muscular fitness, then if you just run slow enough, you're gonna make it for sure.
To that point then, to those listening out there who have never run a marathon, but kind of check the box of general fitness, have a background of athletics or running specifically, I think it's kind of refreshing to know that you can run casually for 2 weeks and run a marathon. What would you say to the people out there who maybe are encouraged to challenge themselves in a new way? And as human beings, I'm sure you have some science on this, just our capability to do hard things in the moment. Because if you frame it as go work hard for 4 hours, it's not as difficult as saying go run a marathon, but they can be the same thing.
Yeah, Dominic, it's not something I would actually recommend for people
Sure.
because I'm a big believer in preparation. And yes, we are all most people are capable of running a marathon, but does that mean that A, they can finish, and B, whether it'll be pleasant? And because if bottom line is if your muscles aren't prepared to go through those steps, so many steps over 26.2 miles, at some point you could cramp up, or after you're going to be so freaking sore. And it's one thing to have that sort of honor, that sort of badge of honor of that walk, of the marathoner's walk, where you're stiff and sore. But it's another thing where it's like you can barely walk. And for me, what's most important in doing a marathon is is when you finish, you want to do another one, because it's not just, yes, the accomplishment of going the distance, but also the habits that go into it, the practices that go into it, the psychological, emotional, and physical benefits of it. And also, just to be fair, you don't have to run a marathon to be fit, because rarely, and basically never in life, is that required of you. But so if you just want to do 10Ks or 5Ks or mile fun runs, it doesn't matter. What matters is being out there, being in nature, being active, not being on your screen, doing things with others, and just living a healthy lifestyle.
I will say, I think I need to get genetically tested or something, because I wasn't really sore the next day. I don't know if that was the Goodies powder in me or something else. But I actually felt quite fine the next day. And I will say, to your point, what I neglected was the lack of feelings around the preparation. So in high school, when I was competitive in cross country and track and field, I think there was a sense of accomplishment before I even started the race. No matter whether it was the season opener or a championship race where it was like you had to place top 8 to move on and qualify for the state meet or whatever it might be. I think there was a level of satisfaction that comes from working really hard for 10 weeks, 15 weeks, 20 weeks. And I didn't feel that obviously on race day, because it was only 2 weeks, and that was kind of what the challenge was. What are your thoughts on, and I know you gave them to me, but preparation, and how a lot of times it's more meaningful nailing the preparation than nailing race day? Because you, like I did, you can fake it through 4 hours, but it's almost more impressive to be dedicated and to be consistent for 12 weeks. And that says everything about you as a person and the qualities and attributes of a person that you are.
Yeah, Dominic, I'm totally with you on that, because the reality is, I might have mentioned this in our first podcast together, that rarely will you ever find what you're looking for when you cross the finish line. The real satisfaction is, first of all, getting to the start. And there are several levels here. Is just, like, I put in the work for 12 weeks, and that took discipline. It took motivation. It took confidence, and it took commitment and focus. And so there's a lot of satisfaction out of that. And for me, I know from my own personal experience as an endurance athlete, that's why one of the big reasons why I train, because I just enjoy being out there, challenging myself, seeing myself improve, get stronger and faster. That's point one. So yeah, there's a lot of satisfaction in getting to the line healthy and ready to go. The second, of course, is going the distance. And, the reason why we do marathons, let me rephrase that. We wouldn't do marathons if they weren't hard, because there'd be no satisfaction in it. The reason why we do them is because they're challenging, because they challenge us to push our limits. They show us what we're capable of, often well beyond what we thought we were capable of. And you hear that constantly with new marathoners, that it's like, when I first thought about doing a marathon, I thought it was impossible. But all of a sudden, the impossible became possible. And then, well, gosh, if that can apply to my running, maybe it can apply to other aspects of my life, whether education or career or what have you. So then, yes, going the distance is a satisfaction. Yes, getting the medal put around your neck is a wonderful badge of courage. And of course, after you've done a marathon and you get on the plane next day, and everybody, like Boston or New York or Chicago, everybody's got their T-shirt on. Everybody, you're proud of it, and you want people to know. And I thoroughly respect that. But it's running the distance is not going to change your life. What changes your life is those 12 weeks leading up to it, and going the distance and accomplishing the goal. And then hopefully the idea is that it's not a one-off, that you're creating a lifestyle of healthiness. And that's ultimately what it's about. Because again, you don't need to run 26 miles to be healthy. You don't need to run 6 days a week to be healthy. So it's a matter of just sort of what you want to do, but importantly, at a minimal level, creating a lifestyle that will foster health and activity and so on.
I'm about to take us and open up a whole loophole that we can decide to venture into or keep brief. In terms of lifestyle and what you were talking about there, it begs the question, how do you create a new habit and how do you break old habits? What's the psychology of both of those? Yeah,
well, there have been many, many books written on that, and nobody's quite figured it out. But I think there are a couple of things. First of all, intention. Like you make something, I want to live a healthier lifestyle. And then you have to be practical about it, because developing, committing to a healthier lifestyle, it sort of takes discipline, but it really just takes creating an environment that supports the change. So, for example, if you walk on the way to work, you walk past a donut shop. Well, take a different route. Then you won't be tempted to stop in. If you want to go to the gym after a day's work, go there directly from the office or wherever you work instead of going home first. Because once you get home, you have a snack, you sit down. Oh gosh, I don't feel like going out. Also, you need support, because let's say you're trying to be healthy, but everybody around you is unhealthy. Whether it's because they're watching TV all the time, or they're eating unhealthy food, or drinking too much, things like that. We are products of our culture. So if we're being constantly sending messages of lack of support, then it's hard to make that change. If you're getting feedback from your community that this is bad, like what's wrong with you, then it's going to be really hard to change. So one of the toughest things to do is like make new friends. Or enlist your friends to join the journey with you. And then start small. And this is where I'm resisting your, okay, I have 2 weeks till whatever marathon I'm going to start training for it. Is do it slowly, because whether it's going into the gym and exercising, lifting weights, running, if you do too much too early, there's very little reward and a lot of punishment. You're sore, you're sweaty, you feel bad, you're tired, and that doesn't encourage you to want to do more of it. And so it's about being able to just work your way into it, let your body get accustomed to it, until finally the endorphins start firing. And then, of course, if you can do something, whether it's running, like joining a running club, going to the gym with friends, it's a social thing as well. Because one of the great things about running, as opposed to, say, swimming, is that you can just chat it up. And it's a great way to bond with people. Plus, they support you, they encourage you, you support them, you encourage them. And so it's like a multiple win-win. So it's really about, it's less about discipline and more about intention, commitment, and making changes in your life that will support your new habits long enough to become habits. Because at first it's like, oh my gosh, I got to go to the gym again. But you do that for 3 months, then it's like, time to go to the gym. And then your life's changed.
I love it. Speaking on the friends piece, I think that's something that either accelerates a lot of people. If I were to ask you about your friends, I'm sure you'd tell me about all sorts of incredible individuals, and I could then deduct, oh, well, no wonder Dr. Jim is the way he is. Or the opposite. It's, someone who's struggling with X, Y, and Z in life, struggles with motivation, struggles to go to the gym, do the things you were mentioning, and you ask about their friends, and well, there are people who do none of those things, right? So it'd be going against the tribe, if we want to go back to psychology. It's going against tribes. So there's more tension, there's more conflict there. I heard this great framing of this once where it's like, think about how hard it is to, change your lifestyle, change your diet, and be more into all these things. And it was like, if it's that hard to change in you, it's impossible to change it in someone else or to ask them to change it. So what are your thoughts on friends? How to change them, get new ones, break out of that? I think as time goes on, as you grow up, it becomes increasingly difficult to realize that life is chapters, and leaving behind people, that it's not abandoning them. It's just you grew up and you got different interests and you're a new person, and you need to find people who support that.
Yeah. Well, Dominic, I want to start by saying that to change your life, you don't need to abandon your family and friends necessarily. You might just need to compartmentalize them and find a community that you can share this change with. And that's why, again, running clubs, group exercise at gyms, all these are great ways to do that. So you don't need to totally reject your entire life. But you do need to make sure that there are at least counterbalances to those messages that oh, what's wrong with you? What are you exercising? What are you, a loser? Come on, have a piece of pie, whatever. Because that's a pretty heavy lift to totally change your community, your life, and so on. And I've known people who've moved places like to Tucson or Sedona or something like that to have a healthier lifestyle. But most people don't have that choice because there's either family or a job, or they just like where they live. But it's possible to find your new people in that environment. You just need to look for them and make them another part of your life.
Not getting too off the beaten track, let's bring it back to race day. So for someone or myself, you finish the race, I think immediately your mind goes to, okay, when's the next one, or what's the next challenge? What's the science of reward and that pathway of like finishing a task and then looking on to the next?
Yeah, I'm a big believer that you shouldn't necessarily feel like you need to like sign up for the next one. And it's interesting because when I finished my first Ironman, the woman who became my wife went with me. We'd been dating for less than a month. And after the race, I said, if I talk about signing up for another Ironman, slap me upside the head. And 2 weeks later, I signed up for another Ironman. And thankfully, she didn't slap me upside the head. But I think there's a time you don't need to make any big decisions because, first of all, you're on a high or maybe a low. And neither are great places to make decisions. But just be in the moment and enjoy it. Wear the T-shirt to work if you want to. Wear the medal on the bus if that's maybe a little bit too weird. But revel in the experience. And then when you start to feel better, and maybe you've recovered. And for me, after I was done running marathons, I would take a good 10 days off from running. And I raced marathons. I didn't just run them. So my body was definitely challenged. And so you want your body to recover, because even if you just run a marathon for participation, regardless of the time, it's still a real serious physical demand. And so allow yourself the reward of being able to just kick back and maybe stay active, go for walks, for example. If you have a bike, go for a bike ride or a swim, but don't feel like the need to get right back out there. And then after that, then you can sit back and go and reflect and go like, okay, yeah, that was a really cool experience. I'm going to sign up for another one. Or, you know what, bucket list, glad I did it, check it off. But you know what, I'd really like to try swimming or a triathlon or just running shorter races or just running. Because I forget if I told you the story, but I'm a very competitive person. And I've been a runner for a very long time, but I hadn't raced ever. It was always just part of my training for other sports. And then I was living in Colorado at the time, and there was this local fundraising race. And a friend talked me into doing it. And I knew what was going to happen. And what I thought was going to happen happened. Was I did the race, and I did pretty well. And I thought, I wonder if I can go faster. And ever since then, I've been back in the endurance sport world, first running and now with triathlon. And so it's like, be careful what you wish for, but also make sure you're doing it for healthy and positive reasons.
Let's address a specific unique group, which we probably have a large subset of the audience within this group. We kind of spoke to marathoners right there where, you do maybe 2 a year, 1 in the spring, 1 in the fall is kind of the general direction. You have the ability to take a break in between, have this long build up. A large subset, I think, of our listeners are, collegiate, high school, really elite athletes who, when I was a cross country athlete, it was 10 straight weeks of racing. And so you finished on a Saturday. Next Saturday was an invitational or a race or a dual meet, whatever it might be. How do you, finish that race and like go through that process where it's very close to each other? And specifically at the end of the season, you can have 4 weeks in a row where it's important. You got to place top 8 to move on, and then place top 8 to move on. And the stakes raise a little bit more each and every single time.
Yeah, so it requires getting into a rhythm and also making sure there's recovery. And so if there's a race on the weekend, Monday's always off, just completely off, because your body needs to rejuvenate. Now, obviously, cross country, we're talking usually 5K for high school. And so the demand is not that significant. The body can handle doing a 5K race once a week. But nonetheless, there needs to be that opportunity for recovery and to refuel and maybe do schoolwork or work or whatever it might be. And then maybe Tuesday or Wednesday, you get back to training for a couple of days. But it's a lot of maintenance at that point, because you're not going to be making gains in your speed in the middle of an 8-week period of weekly races. And so just being really aware of how your body feels. And one of the great lessons I learned from triathlon and then running before was just listening to my body, because it speaks to you. But initially it just whispers. And whether the whisper is a little bit of a sore throat or a little twinge in your calf, but it's important to listen to your body when it's whispering, because by the time it starts yelling at you because you weren't listening, then you're sick and you're missing time, or you're injured and you're rehabbing. And so it's a matter of finding that balance of how much you can push while also giving yourself time to recover. And of course, the real challenge, especially if you're super motivated, is that people equate taking time off with being lazy, or I'm losing my fitness. And one of the most important lessons you can learn as an endurance sport athlete is that recovery is training. It's not the absence of training, because as you might know from exercise physiology, that when you lift weights, for example, you don't get stronger when you lift weights. You get stronger. Your muscles actually break down. They get torn, if you will, but they get stronger in the days after when your body heals those fissures and repairs and gets stronger.
I mentioned like the last 4 weeks of someone's season where there's, more, if you want to make the state meet or the national meet, you got to perform. How should people be viewing pressure, and how should they mentally work through it if they have pre-race nerves, which I think a lot of people can relate to?
Yeah, that's a huge one, and probably the number one reason why people come to see me. And the challenge, of course, is that races matter. And if you're a runner, you're investing your time, your energy, your money in these goals that you want to achieve. And so it's easier said than done, but constantly reminding yourself of the process, because going the distance, whether it's a 5K or a marathon, is that's not the thing that makes people nervous. It's really a potential outcome. And which particular outcome, Dominic? Failure. But so a lot of people think, though, I just need to focus on the outcome because that'll motivate me and get me going. But by focusing on the outcome, it actually prevents you from reaching the goal you want. 2 reasons. First of all, is that if you're focused on when does the outcome of a running race occur? Well, at the end, when you cross the finish line. So if your mind is at the end, you're not focusing on what you need to do to get from the start to the finish. And whether that's pacing or nutrition or altering your stride, whatever it might be. Also, what makes you nervous is not the distance. Again, it's that you might fail. And so anytime you start thinking about, like, it's okay to have a goal, like to go under 3 hours or whatever time you might want to have, or beat your buddy or whatever. But whenever you have those thoughts, say, wait a minute, okay, I want that. Now, what do I need to do to get there? And so you focus on your training. You focus on your warm-up, your meal the night before, your warm-up the morning of, your pacing. If you have a smartwatch, you're looking at your heart rate. And then you, of course, need to focus on your fueling. Because the reality is, if you focus on what you need to do to run your best, that is the process, good things are going to happen. And Dominic, that's a phrase I use, is good things are going to happen, because I can't say you're going to win or podium or top 10 or break 3 hours or whatever. But whatever your definition of good things will happen is, you have a better chance of good things happening.
Fascinating. Super fascinating. Why do you think, and I think you kind of briefly covered this, I think the answer is because people place emphasis on it and it matters to them. But why do you think so many people have such deep pre-race nerves, sometimes at the point where people are throwing up before their races?
Yeah.
Over
a couple things. First of all, we live in a culture of achievement. And so it's not that you did a race, it's like, how fast were you? And so there's this pressure from culture, like you have to do it well. And what's interesting is that people get so, non-professional, non-serious competitor runners get so wrapped up in the results when it has zero impact on their lives. Like, their family still loves them, their friends still care for them, they're still going to have a job when they go to work the next day or whatever. And yet we invest in ourselves. That's how humans are. When we care deeply about something, we want to do our best and we don't want to fail. And so a lot of it is just keeping perspective. It's like, whether I finish or not, it's not going to change my life dramatically. And that's one thing I always marveled at when I was running marathons, is that, I always hoped or thought that running a marathon would change my life. And you occasionally hear people saying, like, even in podcasts, where it's like, oh my gosh, running a marathon changed my life. My guess, it probably didn't. But maybe the race didn't, maybe other aspects of the experience did. But bottom line is, it's not going to dramatically change you. Like, for me, as soon as the soreness was gone, or even now with my triathlon racing, when I go do a race, and even if I do really well, I come home, life goes on, didn't affect my life at all. But then I get back to training and I enjoy the training. But the races, it's like, they don't really matter. But part of the human condition is we invest our things we care about, and we want to do well. But the more you can separate yourself from that and put things in perspective, the less nervous you'll get and the better you'll do.
What's the psychology behind goal setting? And does setting goals make you more likely to achieve the goal?
Yeah, goal setting is probably the most robustly studied area of sports psychology. And in fact, even more broadly in the corporate world, there's been a ton of research on it. And research is very clear that setting specific goals is way better, is more effective than no goals. Because we are directed beings. We like to have a destination and we like to know how to get there. And that's why Waze and Google Maps, we love that kind of stuff. So it also provides us with an incentive, like, I want to achieve that. And as you well know, one of the great joys in life is setting a goal, working toward a goal, and achieving a goal. And so it provides us with that motivation. It also provides us with a direction, because you could say, like, I want to drive to, I live in Northern California, I want to drive to Las Vegas. Just making that up. Well, if I don't know how to get there, well, first of all, if I don't know I want to go to Las Vegas, I'm not going to go to Las Vegas. But even if I did, I couldn't get there if I didn't know how. And so goals provide the how of how to get to your destination of whatever you want to accomplish. And so there's a whole process of going through it, but basically having them specific, measurable, achievable, meaning they have to be realistic. The R is realistic, and time sensitive. So you don't want to just set a goal that says, "Oh, yeah, I want to run a marathon." No, I want to run a marathon on October 5th. And there are two others. They've transitioned from what are called SMART goals, the acronym, to SMART-er goals. And I'm not sure if I can remember the second R, but the E in SMART-er is emotionally laden, meaning you want a goal that you resonate with emotionally, that inspires you. And then the other R is I don't remember. I have to look it up. But anyway, smarter goal. That's sort of the framework. That acronym is a framework for how to set the best types of goals.
I want to take a quick pause, quick aside from the conversation of goal setting, because I know what I want to ask you following up from that, and circle back on what just happened there, which is you talking about all this information for getting one of the R's, XYZ. You have so much information in your head. It's unbelievable. I've deducted this from our two conversations. Simple question. How in the world do you remember it all?
Yeah. You do something for a long time, and I've been doing this for decades. You either get pretty good at it or you're not going to be in the field for very long. And so it's like you do something enough. And obviously I've done a ton of writing and a ton of speaking. And I mean, I've lived this both as an athlete, as a runner, and as someone with a Ph.D. in psychology. And so you do something a lot, you think about it a lot, it just sinks in your brain until it's just like so readily available. So it's not like you need to go back into a storage room and figure out where things are. It's just right there at my fingertips. And that's what happens when you do something a long time and you're passionate about it. Yeah.
That just blows me away. I think you've written 18 books. I know you've done a ton of podcasts, ton of blogs. It seems like you could reference them all just through responses and whatnot. So I'm just so curious on retaining information, because I think in a world that's so distracted from our phones, I've heard this term, but I think it's true. Digital dementia is going to be studied. We're losing our ability to retain information. And I've noticed that about myself. So I'm so impressed. I'll throw you all these questions that are just totally come into my head at the last minute, and you just boom, study, boom, this, that, the other thing. So
thank you.
Anyways, back to my point about goal setting. Do you think, from your experience from with your clients, do you think people set too big of goals or too small of goals?
I would say in general, too small a goal, but they both serve a purpose that isn't healthy. So if you set small goals, if you fail, well, they're just small goals. It wasn't a big deal. Or if you set really big goals, then if you don't reach them, then you have an excuse. And so it's really important to set goals that are a little beyond your reach, that you can only have a pretty good sense you can achieve if you really work hard at it. Because setting goals is at best an inexact science and more like an art, because we don't really know what we're capable of. And so once you set the goals, and hopefully you maybe can set the goals by maybe getting assistance from a coach or a friend who knows a lot about it, so you can figure out what's realistic. Or you can try running for a while and get some data and see and let that guide you. But constantly also adjusting, because the inexact aspect of goals is that you don't know how long they're going to take. So if you set a goal, I want to do X pace in a month, and you do it in 2 weeks, well, are you just going to stop? No. You hopefully get to recalibrate and set a new goal. So you're constantly making these adjustments upward or downward, because sometimes you thought it would take 4 weeks, but it took 7 weeks. But it's a matter of just continuing to see progress. That's the key thing with goals, is you want to see yourself constantly making progress. And that doesn't mean it's totally linear, because as with running, you plateau, you have a little setback, you need to recover. But as long as the general trajectory is upward, then that's really rewarding. Because again, like I said earlier, one of the great joys in life is setting a goal, working toward a goal, and achieving a goal. And because that makes us feel good. And we generally like to repeat that which makes us feel good.
How important do you think process goals are on the road to an outcome goal? So for you yourself, you've broken 3 hours on the marathon. I'm sure you had the goal in mind of 2:59, but you had to have those process goals of, okay, I need to run X amount of miles per day. That's a goal. I need to get this many hours of sleep. That's a goal. And ultimately those process goals are what lead to the outcome goal. A lot of times I see people just set the outcome goal and they get none of the benefit or gratification or simply results from those process goals.
Oh, process goals are absolutely essential. And it's so difficult because we live in an outcome driven world that everybody wants the outcome. And that's great. And it's interesting. I've heard other sports psychologists say, "Oh, I don't think about results. Results don't matter, but they matter. That's why we do races, and that's how you get ahead in life. You don't get ahead in life by working hard, although that's necessary. You get ahead by producing results, and so they're important. So, like I use this metaphor of a pink elephant. So the pink elephant is the outcome. Now, I can't get you to just ignore the pink elephant. And I can't get you to move the pink elephant either. So it's a matter of turning away from it and looking at, and having another jungle animal, if you will, to look at, which takes your mind off of the pink elephant. So I talk about a green rhino. The green rhino are the process goals. So it's great. I want to achieve that goal, whatever time goal it is. I really want to do that. Wonderful. Now, how are you going to do that? Whether it's a 12-week program, or whether it's what are you going to do the last week before the race in your taper, or is it what are you going to do the night before, the morning of, and then during the race. So totally when I used to run marathons, and I still do triathlons, I'm looking at my pace, I'm making sure I'm fueling, and I'm checking in with my body constantly. Because by doing that, as you suggest, Dominic, then I'm able to go as fast as I can, or get go the distance if that's the goal.
Dr. Jim, starting to wrap up this conversation. We were joking before we got kicked off about your work, what it is you do. I think a lot of people have gained a lot of wisdom, tool sets, things that they can apply into their everyday life. But I think there are people out there who haven't worked with you, who are curious, like, what is it exactly that you do? So if you bumped into a stranger on the subway, wherever in public, in the airport, and they said, "What do you do, Dr. Jim? What does your day look like?" What would you reply with?
Very good. Okay. So this is definitely not an elevator speech unless it's a really tall building. But anyway, so I start off with this idea that the problem with the mental side of running is that it's not tangible. So if I want to see how strong you are, you go into the gym, you put these iron plates on the end of a bar. We go onto the track. We got it on the clock. We can look at your heart rate. All the physical side is tangible. You can see it. You can touch it. You can feel it. You can measure it directly. So it's easy to wrap your arms around. But the mental side, it's like grabbing onto fog. Like, we all know the mind is important, but it's like what aspects of it? And I can't measure directly motivation or confidence or focus. So a big part of and another part of that is that there's no vocabulary. Like most people can talk about, pace and heart rate and time with running. But most people don't have a vocabulary for the mental side of running. And so what I start with is I make the intangible tangible by offering them a vocabulary. and talk to them about what areas impact performance. Another thing is that runners are doers. Runners want to do stuff to get better. So I have to give them stuff to do to get better. And so it's again, making the intangible aspects of the mind tangible. So for example, I talk about mental training. So runners can appreciate training because they do running training and strength training and so on. Also, I talk about how the mind is made up of muscles. So just like physical muscles, mental muscles can be weak, they can be strong, and they can be injured. But they're not going to get stronger unless they're exercised. So again, athletes can understand that because they're just like physical muscles. And so some of the common mental muscles that I work with are motivation, confidence, intensity. And I mean by that range of physical activation from sleep to sheer terror. And depending upon the race, you're going to be at a different level of intensity. So if you're doing a 100-meter dash, you're going to be pretty high intensity. But for a marathon, you're going to be very low intensity because you don't want to burn a lot of fuel. But also at the high end, you don't want to be really nervous, which is just, nervousness is just too much intensity. So motivation, confidence, intensity, the ability to focus or not focus. And then many people run with headphones, which there's some upsides and there's some downsides, separate topic. And then another muscle is their emotions, because it's your emotions that ultimately motivate us and fuel us and propel us toward our goals. And then these muscles need to be exercised. So some of the tools that I use, some of the exercises I use with athletes to strengthen those mental muscles are goal setting, which we've talked about, imagery, visualization, same thing, self-talk, routines, and breathing. And so, we could have a separate podcast for each of those if you wanted, but it's important for runners to understand that, well, here's a way to look at it. So I often ask athletes that I start working with, do you do mental stuff? And they go, I don't really think so. But every runner does mental stuff. They do things to motivate themselves, to stay positive, to stay relaxed, to stay focused. But mental stuff isn't mental training, just like going into the gym and doing arm curls 3 times a week is not physical training. Going to the track and running 200 meters every month, that's not running training. So you think about what makes a running program effective. First of all, it's comprehensive. It covers all the different areas in which physical performance your running performance is affected. It's structured. You don't just go out and run. You go out and have a workout that you're going to do, whether it's a track workout or a distance, whatever. Third, it's consistent. You don't just run every couple of weeks. You run anywhere from 3 to 6 days a week, depending upon your seriousness. And you put effort into it. Because you can have the greatest running program in the world, but if you don't put in the effort, it's worthless. And so the idea then is to approach mental training and preparation for a race mentally the same way you approach your running training. Comprehensive, structured, consistent, effort put into it. Because it's not just about thinking about, I'm going to do positive self-talk at mile 20. It's not going to work. That's like saying, I'm going to start running at mile 20. No, you have to start running long before to prepare yourself, except in your case where you start just 2 weeks before.
I'm an outlier. I'm a terrible.
You're the outlier for sure. So this idea about mental training, that's how I like to think about it, and that's what I do it's a big part of the work I do with the endurance athletes I work with.
Amazing. What would you say to someone who, let's say high school, trying to figure out their life, what they want to do with their life? They hear you, they see other people, they're really interested in this field of work, and not just becoming a sports psychologist one day, but being like yourself, someone who's successful, stands out in the field. What direction would you have for them? And just give them a general understanding of what it takes in the process and the steps to get to the point where you go from Jim Taylor to Dr. Jim Taylor, Ph.D.
Well, I appreciate that. First of all, I get calls from young people all the time who are interested in the field, because it's an amazing field. I've been doing this for decades, and Mark Twain said, find something you love to do and you'll never work a day in your life. And to this day, I can't wait to get to work. I love what I do. But the reality is that it's still a challenge. Very few people actually make a living, much less a good living, doing as mental coaches or sports psychologists, because it still hasn't quite the field hasn't been seen yet as a necessity. Now you hear about all these amazing athletes who have sports psychologists, but it hasn't really trickled down that much to the high school level. To a college level, to a degree, yes. Pro teams have people involved, but it's not certainly the same level of need as conditioning coaches or position coaches or whatever it might be specific to the sport. So you have to have a huge passion for it. You have to go to grad school. You have to get a master's or ideally a Ph.D. in psychology, and there are various types of those. And then you have to be willing to work really hard and be creative and stick with it. It's very much a metaphor. I mean, running a marathon is like someone's career, and it's hard at first, and it's uncomfortable, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and sometimes you cramp metaphorically. But if you have that passion and you have that belief that you can get where you want to go, then it's possible. Not guaranteed, because there's no guarantees in life. But I've always had this fundamental faith with myself that things would work out. So I've worked hard, and I've let my passions drive me, and I have for me an amazing life. So I feel very grateful to be able to do what I do, but I also don't think I'm the only one who can do it. That's for sure.
What would you say took you from good to great? Because I think there are probably a lot of sports psychologists, a lot of doctors out there who no one knows who they are outside of their niche little town that they serve. There's a reason that you got put on my radar, on my plate, and that you've written 18 books and the whole 9 yards of accomplishments that would be longer than the elevator speech. So what took you from good to great?
Yeah, boy, that's a tough one. I'm not going to be modest here. I think I'm a fairly intelligent fellow. I have the ability to think in creative and innovative ways. I'm driven by my passions. And I have the ability to focus for long periods of time, and I'm incredibly productive. And I don't say this out of ego. I'm just saying that this is what I've shown myself to have. I have a wide range of skill sets. I love writing. It's obviously been a huge part of my life, and that's a really important part of my success. And plus I'm a good speaker, and people seem to like me. And that hasn't always been the case, but I've become quite likable as I've gotten older, and I seem to be able to connect with people well. And when you get right down to it, the ability to help somebody is about the relationship. It's not about the techniques that much. And so I guess that's a big part of it. But part of me also wonders, like, I have no idea. because it's like, did I have luck? I don't know. I mean, I think I earned most of my luck. Yeah, I guess that's all.
We're still trying to answer that question as time goes on, probably.
Yeah, maybe so. I'll have to work on that one. You finally stumped me. You got me to stop and go, huh?
No, I mean, I think it was Thomas Jefferson who said, it's funny, the harder I seem to work, the more luck I seem to have. And right. I think that's what it boils down to. I think for you too, I can speak to it. You're excellent with people. And I think that's the one thing that connects all industries. If like you said, if people like you, if you're a kind individual, God, universe, whatever you believe in seems to benefit you positively. And I think if you're just a good person, word gets out, people seem to like you, respect you. And I truly believe if you're a good person, good comes back to you.
One other thing that I might add is this has been I don't know how you feel about a little bit of swearing, but
go for it.
One thing I take pride in is my productivity. So I get shit done. And a lot of people have big dreams, and I totally encourage that. But to make dreams become reality, maybe to go from good to great, then you have to do a lot of work and make choices and sacrifices and really commit to it. And at the same time, you make me out to be some famous superstar. And let's put things in perspective here. I'm very well respected. I'm well known in my field, but it's not like I'm like curing cancer. I'm not like Taylor Swift or something like that. I don't know. So one thing that's come to me in my advanced age is a sense of humility and gratitude, and that's made me much better at what I do, and it makes me a much better person. And so, one thing that when I work with young athletes, I work with a wide range of athletes and other achievers from 11 years old up to 70-year-old business people and athletes and so on. And one thing when I work with let's say a 17-year-old, I'll say, like, this journey you're starting now, and the journey is starting with me, but hopefully it will continue. I mean, it's way better to clear out the crap and find your way when you're 17 than when you're 57. But at the same time, it's never too late. And so whatever you want to do, find your passion, find what you're good at, commit to it, look for any obstacles that might be holding you back, remove the obstacles as best you can, and just keep your eye on the prize and just follow your heart. And again, going back to that, good things will happen. I don't know if you're going to write 18 books or you're going to be, I was going to say president of the United States, but let's not even go there. And, but you're going to get somewhere really good because your passion, you care deeply, and you love what you do.
To your point about getting stuff done, maybe one of my all-time favorite quotes is, most successful people aren't talented, smart, or lucky. They just acted while everyone else talked themselves out of it. Everyone has dreams. Very few act on those dreams. That's
absolutely true. Yeah. And talk is cheap. You got to do the work. And whether you're a runner or you're in school or you're on a career path.
100%. Dr. Jim, final question for you today. We mentioned the 18 books multiple times. I didn't ask you this last time. I should have, both for my own benefit as well as the audience. One book. Where should people start? What's the favorite, or where do you think people should go from this conversation? I want to send them somewhere.
Yeah, well, I've sort of divided my books into three categories. One is sort of sports psychology. The other is well-being, personal growth, and the other is parenting. So if you're interested in parenting, and you have kids or athletes, I wrote a book called Raising Young Athletes, and it's on Amazon. If you're interested in personal growth, I wrote a book. Hang on a sec. How to survive and thrive when bad things happen. And it's basically how to deal with crises and tough times. If you're a runner and you want to just improve mentally as a runner, my book, Train Your Mind for Athletic Success. Perfect. So those are the three I would go with in the different buckets you might be interested in.
He's a businessman too, ladies and gentlemen. I asked him for one. He's selling three. Go get them all.
At the same time, here, Dominic, here's a very good non-business thing. So if you go to my website, probably 95% of everything I've ever written is on my website for free. So if you go to my blog, if you go to my podcasts, which are basically just serialized versions of my book, the reality is, Dominic, I didn't write 18 books because I was going to make a ton of money off them. I made some, but I wrote them because I had to. Meaning, like, so much for me in being successful is having it come from core values, who you are. And so for me to not write would be for me to not be authentic. I wasn't being, if I get an idea, I have to write about it. And not necessarily a book, it might just be a blog post or what have you. But I can't not do it because it wouldn't be true to who I am. And so none of these are labor for me. This is just expressing myself. It's expressing who I am at my core.
Quick final story to end the podcast that relates to that. I had she's been on the podcast a few times, but she's Nike's like top physical therapist, so she works with Nike's top athletes. Her name's Colleen Little. She had this excellent quote when I was asking her about her career and her thoughts on it. She said, "The meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purpose of life is to give it away." And I think through your books and through giving those ideas away, or through 95% of your work being free, that's your meaning, and that's the purpose of your life. So we'll end on that.
I'm very touched. It's a wonderful quote, so thank you.
Yeah, of course. Dr. Jim, thank you so much for blessing me with your time. I always grow so much from it. I got so many messages after last episode. I know a lot of people benefit from it. So thank you for your work. It's such a gift. And hey, I'll make this promise. I'm not going to invite you back on the podcast until I properly train for a marathon, and we'll have some good training to dive into and to recap, and we can actually talk about something that's more natural to my heart, which is good, hard preparation rather than 2 weeks, anomalies, all that sort of stuff. That's funny to dance around. So thank you so much, Dr. Jim. Appreciate you.
You're very welcome, Dominic. And it's been really fun being on your podcast, and you're a great human being. And if I can help out in any way, you know where to find me.